India today. India is, one of the richest and the poorest countries of the world simultaneously. Forbes magazine listed the 10 richest people in the world, 4 of them were Indians. And the largest number of people who sleep hungry in the world are also Indians. One in every second child in India is malnourished. So it's in this very peculiar context, and I think that the lessons of what I briefly speak about are perhaps even more relevant for richer countries, the US and Canada, for instance, than for poorer countries, because it reflects a certain growing consensus, and I think we need to articulate it and fight for it. That we reach a stage in the world today where we must all agree on a floor of human dignity below which no human being should be allowed to fall. No person should sleep hungry, no child should sleep hungry, no one should have to sleep under the open sky, no one should be denied children basic health care, and no child should be deprived of schooling. For instance, just some basic things like this. And that we agree that whatever it costs, we will raise the money and we will make it happen. When this case was initiated in 2001 in India, there were government warehouses were full of grain, so much grain that actually one economist said if you pile it up, you could go up to the moon and come halfway back. That much grain was in the government's own warehouses, and yet people were starving, and there was large-scale scarcity, and so went with a very simple premise that the right to food should be recognized as a fundamental right. The Supreme Court, asked the governments, and the government actually came back saying that we are already doing a great deal. We have, feeding programs for children who are small. We have school feeding programs. We give subsidized food in rations. We provide aged people pensions and so on and so forth. We are already doing a great deal. And then people from across the country started sending in information about how these programs are actually functioning. And I recall there were days in the Supreme Court where wheelbarrows and wheelbarrows of paper were brought in to convince the court how badly these programs were functioning. And then the court did a series of, it's passed about 60, 70 orders to date. But if you look back, I think that it did broadly 4 things, 4 kinds of orders. The first was, it said, you cannot now reduce any of these programs, you can only expand them. In a sense, it converted schemes into entitlements. The second thing it did was to expand the content of these entitlements. Is the pensions enough? Is the school meal sufficient? Etc. The third was to universalize these entitlements. It said, now everybody, for instance, starting with school meals, every child in a government school across the country must get a school meal, no question of resources, etc. Every child below the age of 6 has to be fed in a feeding program. Maternity benefit amounts have to be given to every pregnant woman. Old people must get pensions of a reasonable level on time, and so on and so forth. So it universalized these entitlements. And fourthly, it created a mechanism through the office of the commissioners. It said that to enforce, to monitor on a day-to-day basis whether governments, and we have a very large country of 1 billion plus people, the 25 state governments, and there's the federal government. Are these governments doing enough? So 2 commissioners were appointed, of which I am one of them. And we work on a voluntary basis, but we work to ensure we give reports, detailed reports to the governments, etc. I think that these spectacular impact, both in material terms and in moral, in symbolic terms, can be explained, and the lessons that I briefly like to say is that like South Africa actually has enshrined the right to food as a fundamental right. But I went across and spoke to friends in South Africa. It's not being enforced in the same kind of way. So I think that the first thing that you need to do is to unpack and explicate that right. It's not enough to say that there is a right to food, because my barrier to getting food is very different from yours and hers and somebody else's. So the right to food for a child means this. For a child in school it means this, but for a child who's outside school it means this. The right to food for an able-bodied man means this. For a single woman it means this. For an aged person it means pensions on time, and so on and so forth. So you need to unpack and explain, and these 70 orders that have been passed are actually consecutively looking at each of these categories of people and explicating that order. So I think that's really critical as a learning. And then you have to create a mechanism for the enforcement of these rights, for monitoring and the effective enforcement. And so we prepare detailed reports running into hundreds of pages every year. We submit it to the courts. We say this is the performance. But we've also tried to go beyond by saying these are the people left out of existing entitlements. So, for instance, we have a school meal program for every child in school. But what about the child who's not in school? And so you need to create new entitlements for that child. Or we have feeding programs for women who are mothers. What about women who are single, who are not mothers? What about older women who are severely malnourished? What should be the new entitlements that are created for them? And so on and so forth. So you create that enforcement mechanism which is active. And thirdly, you need to have a civil society formation which actually builds monitors. Any right, however detailed, however explicated, however enforced, unless there are people vigilant all across who organize people around that right, it's not going to change their lives. So I think it's this combination that we need to learn from. And I believe, and I repeat, that it is really the wealthy nations where this needs to be fought for, even the middle income nations. That let us agree that I have a stake that my child should not grow up indifferent to the fact that she sleeps and is well fed and is protected, and there's a child a kilometer away outside on the streets who is foraging for food. It's my stake that should not happen. There's a moral imperative that no mother should have to teach her child how to sleep hungry. I think it is that, on that premise, that we need to be more assertive, demand more from our courts, and through the courts demand more from our guardians.